I'm 33 years old, work as a marketing manager in Austin, Texas, and make about $72,000 a year. I live alone in a 2-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood just north of downtown. I've always been pretty cautious about home security, so about a year ago, I installed a Ring doorbell camera and a couple of outdoor cameras around the perimeter of my house. The Ring doorbell was great. I could see who was at my door from anywhere, get motion alerts when someone approached, and even talk to delivery drivers through the two-way audio. It gave me peace of mind, especially when I was traveling for work. This all started in March 2025. I was home one evening, working late on my laptop in my living room. Around 10 p.m., my phone buzzed with a Ring alert. Motion detected at your front door. I opened the app and checked the live feed. Nobody was there, just my empty front porch, lit by the porch light. I figured it was probably a cat or some other animal triggering the motion sensor. That happened occasionally, but then, about 20 minutes later, another alert. Motion detected at your front door. I checked again. Still nobody. But this time, I noticed something odd. My doormat had been moved. It was now askew, like someone had stepped on it and shifted it. I felt uneasy but told myself it could have been the wind, even though it wasn't particularly windy that night. I went to bed around midnight. At 2:37 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Another motion alert. I grabbed my phone and opened the Ring app, still half asleep. The live feed showed someone standing on my porch, a person wearing a dark hoodie facing my door. They were just standing there, completely still. My heart started racing. I sat up in bed, staring at my phone screen. The person didn't knock, didn't ring the doorbell, just stood there for about 30 seconds, then turned and walked away, disappearing off camera. I immediately called 911. I told the dispatcher that someone had been on my porch in the middle of the night. They said they'd send an officer to check the area. 2 patrol cars arrived within 10 minutes. The officers searched my yard, the street, the neighboring properties. They didn't find anyone. One officer asked if I had recorded footage. I showed him the video from the Ring camera. He watched it and nodded. "Looks like someone scoping out the house," he said. "Could be planning a break-in. Keep your doors locked and then call us if you see them again." The officers left, and I spent the rest of the night awake, checking the Ring app every few minutes. The next night, it happened again. At 2:41 a.m., a motion alert. The same person, in the same dark hoodie, standing on my porch. This time, they stood there for over a minute, just staring at the door. I called the police again. They came, searched, found nothing. This continued for 5 nights in a row. Every night, between 2:30 and 3 a.m., the person would appear on my porch, always wearing the hoodie, always just standing there. On the 6th night, something different happened. I was watching the live feed when they appeared. This time, they looked directly at the camera. It was dark and the hoodie obscured most of their face, but I could see their eyes. They were staring right into the lens. Then they raised their hand and waved, a slow, deliberate wave. I felt sick. They knew I was watching. They knew the camera was there, and they were doing this anyway. I called the police again, but also called my friend Marcus, who lived a few blocks away. He came over and stayed with me for the rest of the night. The next day, I went to the police station and filed a formal report. The detective assigned to my case, Detective Ramirez, reviewed all the Ring footage. "This is clearly targeted harassment," she said. "They're trying to intimidate you. Do you know anyone who might want to scare you? Ex-boyfriend, co-worker, neighbor dispute?" I couldn't think of anyone. I'd been single for over a year. I got along fine with my co-workers. I barely knew my neighbors. Detective Ramirez said they'd increase patrols in my area, and that I should consider staying somewhere else for a few days. I took her advice and stayed with my parents for a week. During that time, I checked the Ring app constantly. The person didn't appear while I was gone. When I came back home, everything seemed fine for about 3 days. No late-night visitors, no motion alerts at weird hours. Then on the 4th night back, at 2:53 a.m., my phone buzzed. Motion alert. I opened the app with shaking hands. The person was back. Same hoodie, same position on the porch. But this time, they did something that made my blood run cold. They held up a piece of paper to the camera. Written on it in large black letters were the words, "I know you're watching." I called 911 immediately. I also texted Detective Ramirez with a screenshot of the video. The police arrived quickly, but as always, the person was gone. Detective Ramirez came to my house the next morning. She reviewed the latest footage and looked concerned. "This is escalating," she said. "They're becoming more bold. I'm going to request additional resources for this case." She asked if I'd noticed anyone following me during the day, anyone at my workplace or at stores who seemed to be watching me. I said no, but I honestly hadn't been paying attention. Over the next week, I became hypervigilant. I checked over my shoulder constantly. I varied my routes to work. I paid attention to everyone around me. And then I noticed him. A man who seemed to be at the same coffee shop as me 2 mornings in a row. Same guy I'd seen at the grocery store over the weekend. He was average height, always wearing a baseball cap, kept his distance but seemed to be observing me. I took a photo of him with my phone and sent it to Detective Ramirez. She ran his image through facial recognition and got a hit. His name was David Chen, 29 years old, lived about 5 miles from me. He had a record. Stalking charges from 3 years ago, but the victim had dropped the charges and he'd only gotten probation. Detective Ramirez brought him in for questioning. At first, he denied everything, said he'd never been to my house, didn't know who I was. But when they showed him the ring footage, he couldn't explain how the person in the videos had the same build, same gait, same clothing style as him. They got a warrant to search his apartment. What they found was disturbing. He had a folder on his computer with dozens of photos of me. Photos taken from a distance at various locations around Austin. The grocery store, my gym, restaurants I'd been to. He also had printed screenshots from my social media accounts, posts I'd made, photos I'd shared. He'd been following me online for months, but the most disturbing thing was a notebook, page after page of notes about my routine, what time I left for work, what time I came home, where I went on weekends. He'd been watching me for at least 6 months before he started showing up on my porch. David was arrested and charged with stalking and harassment. The prosecutor said they had a strong case with all the evidence. During his interrogation, David finally admitted why he'd targeted me. He said he'd seen me at a coffee shop months ago and became interested in me. He'd looked me up on social media, found my name and general location, then used various methods to find my exact address. He said the nightly visits to my porch were his way of being close to me. He knew about the Ring camera and didn't care. In fact, he liked that I was watching. It made him feel connected to me. The psychologist who evaluated him said he showed signs of erotomania, a delusional disorder where someone believes another person is in love with them. David Chen was convicted and sentenced to 4 years in prison, with a restraining order that extends for 10 years after his release. That was 3 months ago. I've since moved to a different house in a different neighborhood. I still have security cameras, including a Ring doorbell, but I also have additional security measures. Motion sensor lights, reinforced locks, a security system that's monitored 24/7. But the damage is done. I'll never feel completely safe in my own home again. Every motion alert makes my heart race. Every time I check the camera feed, I half expect to see someone standing there. The Ring doorbell was supposed to make me feel more secure, and in a way, it did. It caught David Chen. It provided evidence that led to his arrest. Without it, he might have escalated to something worse. But it also showed me how vulnerable I was, how someone could watch me, study me, learn everything about my life without me even knowing. I think about those nights when he stood on my porch, staring at my door. How many times had he been there before I installed the camera? How long had he been watching before I knew? Those are questions I'll never have answers to, and that's what haunts me most. The technology that's supposed to protect us can also show us just how easy it is for someone to invade our lives, to violate our privacy, to make us feel unsafe in the one place we should feel safe. My Ring doorbell sits on my new front door now. I check it constantly, maybe too much, but I'd rather be paranoid and safe than oblivious and vulnerable, because I learned the hard way that monsters are real. They don't hide under beds or in closets. They stand on your front porch at 3 a.m., knowing you're watching, and they don't care. And that's more terrifying than any ghost story I've ever heard. I'm 29 years old, work as a nurse in Seattle, Washington, and make about $78,000 a year. I live with my husband, Jake, and our 2-year-old daughter, Emma, in a house in the suburbs. We're pretty tech savvy, so we have several smart home devices, including 4 Nest security cameras, one in the living room, one in the kitchen, one in the nursery, and one covering the backyard. The cameras were mostly for monitoring Emma and keeping an eye on the house when we were at work. We could check in any time through the Nest app, and the cameras would send alerts if they detected motion or sound. This happened in February 2025. Jake was working late one night, wouldn't be home until around 11 p.m. I'd put Emma to bed around 8 p.m. and was downstairs watching TV. Around 9:30 p.m., my phone buzzed with a notification from the Nest app. Activity detected in Emma's room. I figured Emma had woken up and was moving around in her crib. I opened the app to check on her. The live feed from the nursery camera showed Emma sleeping peacefully in her crib. But then I noticed something that made my heart stop. The rocking chair in the corner of the room was moving, slowly rocking back and forth, like someone was sitting in it. But nobody was there. I stared at my phone screen, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The chair continued to rock for about 30 seconds, then gradually slowed to a stop. I immediately went upstairs to Emma's room. I opened the door slowly and turned on the light. Emma was asleep in her crib. The rocking chair was completely still. I checked the window. It was closed and locked. No draft that could have moved the chair. I sat in the chair and tried rocking it. It moved easily, but there was no way it could have rocked on its own for 30 seconds. I went back downstairs, feeling uneasy. I opened the Nest app and watched the recorded footage. Clear as day, the rocking chair moving back and forth while Emma slept. I texted Jake and told him what happened. He said it was probably just a glitch with the camera, maybe some kind of visual artifact. But the next night, it happened again. At 9:43 p.m., an activity alert from Emma's room. I checked the live feed, and the rocking chair was moving again. This time, I ran upstairs immediately while watching the feed on my phone. As I reached Emma's door, the chair stopped moving. I opened the door. The chair was still. This continued for a week. Every night between 9:30 and 10 p.m., the rocking chair would start moving. Always when I was downstairs, never when I was in the room. Jake and I decided to test it. One night, we both sat in Emma's room during that time window. We watched the rocking chair. It didn't move, not once. But the next night, when we were both downstairs, the Nest app sent an alert. The chair was rocking again. We reviewed all the footage. In every video, Emma was asleep, undisturbed. But the chair rocked by itself for anywhere from 20 seconds to a full minute. I posted about it in a parenting forum online, asking if anyone else had experienced something similar with their Nest cameras. Several people responded saying they had had strange alerts and unexplained movements captured on camera, but most chalked it up to technical glitches or shadows. One response stood out though. A woman said she'd experienced the same thing, a rocking chair moving in her baby's room on camera. She said she'd researched the history of her house and found out a child had died in that room decades ago. That freaked me out. I started researching the history of our house. It was built in 1987. I found property records, previous owners, but nothing about any deaths. Then I found something in the local library's newspaper archives. In 1995, a woman who lived in our house had a daughter who died suddenly at age 2. SIDS, Sudden Infant Death Syndrome. The article mentioned that the mother had found her daughter deceased in her crib one morning. Emma's room. That was the nursery back then too. I showed Jake the article. He was skeptical. You really think a ghost is rocking the chair? I don't know what else it could be. The camera isn't glitching. We can see it moving, clear as day. We decided to bring in a technician from Nest to check the camera. He ran diagnostics, checked the sensors, reviewed the footage. He said the camera was functioning perfectly and had no explanation for what we were seeing. But then he said something interesting. The camera is recording what's actually happening in the room. There's no malfunction in the image capture. That chair is genuinely moving. So what's moving it? I asked. That's not really my area of expertise, he said uncomfortably. But the camera is working as intended. Jake and I didn't know what to do. We considered getting rid of the rocking chair, but something about that felt wrong. Like we'd be disrespecting whoever or whatever was using it. Then one night, something different happened. I was checking the Nest app at 9:45 p.m., expecting to see the chair rocking. Instead, I saw something else. There was a figure sitting in the chair, translucent, barely visible, but definitely there. It looked like a woman, rocking slowly back and forth. I dropped my phone and ran upstairs. When I burst into Emma's room, there was nothing, just the chair, still and empty. I went back downstairs and checked the footage. The figure was there in the recording, faint but visible. A woman sitting in the rocking chair, looking at Emma's crib. I showed Jake. He went pale. That's not possible. I know. We didn't sleep well that night. The next morning, I contacted a local paranormal investigator. I know how that sounds, but I didn't know what else to do. The investigator, a woman named Patricia, came to our house that evening. She brought an EMF meter and some other equipment. She spent about an hour in Emma's room, taking readings, asking questions. Finally, she said, "There's definitely a presence here, a maternal energy. She's not harmful, she's protective." Protective of what? Your daughter. I think she's a mother who lost her child, and she's watching over Emma. The woman who lived here before? The one whose daughter died? Possibly. Or someone else entirely. Sometimes spirits are drawn to places where they experienced strong emotions, especially places associated with children. Patricia said we had a choice. We could try to get the spirit to leave, or we could coexist with it. She said, based on her readings, the spirit meant no harm and was actually keeping watch over Emma. Jake and I talked about it for a long time. It was a bizarre situation, but if Patricia was right, if this spirit was just a mother watching over our daughter, maybe that wasn't a bad thing. We decided to leave things as they were. The rocking chair stayed in Emma's room. The Nest camera stayed up, recording every night. And every night around 9:45 p.m., the chair would rock. Sometimes I'd see the faint figure of the woman sitting there. Most of the time, the chair just moved on its own. It became almost comforting in a way, like Emma had a guardian angel watching over her while she slept. Then about a month ago, something happened that confirmed Patricia's theory. Emma got sick with a high fever. Jake and I were both exhausted from taking care of her. One night, I fell asleep on the couch while Emma was in her crib. At 2 a.m., I woke up to my phone buzzing. Multiple alerts from the Nest app. Loud sound detected in Emma's room. Person detected in Emma's room. I grabbed my phone and checked the live feed. Emma was standing in her crib, crying. And the rocking chair was moving violently, much faster than it ever had before. I ran upstairs. Emma's fever had spiked. She was burning up, her crying weak and distressed. I grabbed her and took her temperature. It was 104 degrees. Jake and I rushed Emma to the emergency room. She was severely dehydrated from the fever. The doctor said if we'd waited much longer, she could have had a seizure or worse. When we got home the next day, I watched the Nest footage from that night. The rocking chair had started moving intensely about 5 minutes before Emma woke up, crying. Like someone was trying to create noise, trying to wake me up to check on Emma. The spirit had alerted us. She'd known Emma was in danger and had done everything she could to get our attention. After that, Jake stopped being skeptical. He understood that whatever was in our house was looking out for our daughter. The rocking continues every night. We've gotten used to it. Emma's now 3 years old, and sometimes she talks about the nice lady in her room. We've never told her about the spirit, but somehow she knows. I still check the Nest camera every night. Sometimes I see the woman sitting in the chair. Most of the time, I just see the chair rocking, and I always say, out loud, "Thank you for watching over her." I don't know if she can hear me, but I hope she knows we're grateful. The Nest camera captured something that defies explanation, something that science and logic can't account for. But instead of being scared, I feel comforted, because our daughter has two mothers looking after her, one who's alive and present, and one who's watching from somewhere else, making sure she's safe. Not all security camera footage reveals something scary. Sometimes it reveals something beautiful. Something that reminds us that love doesn't end with death. That's what our Nest camera showed us. And for that, I'm thankful. Even if it means accepting that we're not alone in our house. That there's someone else here. Someone we can't see except through the lens of a camera. Someone who loves our daughter as much as we do. And that's not something to be afraid of. That's something to be grateful for. I'm 26 years old. Work as a software developer in Denver, Colorado, and make about $85,000 a year. I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of a 4-story building. I'm a pretty private person. keep to myself mostly, work from home 3 days a week. About 6 months ago, I installed an Arlo security camera system in my apartment. 2 cameras inside, one covering the living room and entrance, one in the hallway that can see into my bedroom. I also had 1 camera outside pointing at my apartment door. I got the cameras mostly because there had been some package thefts in the building, and I wanted to make sure my deliveries were safe. The Arlo system was great. I could check the cameras from anywhere, get motion alerts, record footage to the cloud. Everything was fine for the first few months. The cameras did exactly what I needed them to do. I caught a few delivery drivers on camera, monitored my apartment when I traveled for work. Nothing unusual. Then, in March 2025, I started noticing something strange. I'd check my Arlo app and see that there were gaps in the recordings. Like, the camera would be recording, then suddenly there'd be a 5 or 10 minute gap where nothing was saved, then it would start recording again. At first I thought it was a Wi-Fi issue. Maybe my internet was cutting out and the cameras weren't able to upload footage to the cloud. But my internet was working fine, and the gaps kept happening. They always occurred during the day while I was at work, never at night when I was home. Just random gaps in the daytime recordings, usually between 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. I contacted Arlo support. They had me run diagnostics, check my settings, update the firmware. Everything checked out fine. They said if the problem continued, they'd send me replacement cameras. But then one day, I came home from work around 5 p.m., and something was off. My apartment felt different. Not like anything was missing or moved, just a feeling that someone had been there. I checked the Arlo recordings from that day. There it was, another gap, from 1:47 p.m. to 2:34 p.m. No footage, almost an hour missing. I looked around my apartment more carefully. Everything seemed normal. Kitchen was how I left it. Bedroom was untouched. Living room exactly the same. But then I noticed something in my bathroom. The shower curtain was pushed to the opposite side. I always kept it pushed to the left, but now it was pushed to the right. A small thing, but definitely different. Over the next week, I started noticing other small changes. A book on my shelf was upside down. A chair in my kitchen was pulled out slightly from the table. The thermostat was set 2 degrees higher than I'd left it. Each time, there was a corresponding gap in the Arlo recordings. Someone was coming into my apartment, and they knew how to disable the cameras. I changed my locks. I put a chain lock on my door. I even set up a hidden camera, an old phone positioned in my bookshelf, recording separately from the Arlo system. 2 days later, it happened again. Gap in the Arlo footage from 2:15 p.m. to 2:48 p.m. But this time, I had the hidden camera. I rushed home from work and checked the phone. The recording was still there. I watched the footage with my heart pounding. At 2:17 p.m., my apartment door opened. A man walked in using a key. He was wearing maintenance coveralls, the kind the building's maintenance staff wore. He walked straight to where my Arlo cameras were and did something to each one. I couldn't see exactly what, but the cameras must have gone offline because the Arlo recording stopped at that moment. Then the man walked through my apartment. He opened drawers, looked through my things, even went into my bedroom and went through my closet. He wasn't stealing anything. He was just looking, exploring. After about 20 minutes, he came back out to the living room and sat on my couch. He just sat there for another 10 minutes, looking around, like he was making himself comfortable in my space. Then he got up, reactivated the Arlo cameras, and left. Locked the door behind him like nothing had happened. I felt sick watching it. This man had been in my apartment multiple times, going through my things, sitting on my furniture, invading my privacy in the most violation way possible. I took the phone to the police station immediately. I filed a report and showed the detective the footage. Detective Morrison reviewed it carefully. "Do you recognize this man?" "No, I've never seen him before." "He's wearing maintenance coveralls. Does your building have maintenance staff that look like this?" "The building has a few maintenance guys, but I don't know them all by sight." Detective Morrison said he'd talk to the building management and get a list of all maintenance personnel. The next day he called me. "We identified the man in your video. His name is Craig Stevens. He's been working maintenance at your building for about 8 months. Why would he be coming into my apartment?" "That's what we're going to find out. We're bringing him in for questioning." Craig Stevens was arrested at the building later that day. During the interrogation, he admitted to everything. He said he'd been entering my apartment for the past 2 months. He'd made a copy of my key weeks ago when I'd given it to the building office for a maintenance request. He'd been studying my routine, learning when I left for work, when I'd be gone the longest. He knew about my Arlo cameras because he could see them when he entered. So he'd bought a device online, some kind of signal jammer that temporarily disabled Wi-Fi connected devices. He'd turn it on, it would knock out the cameras for as long as he wanted, then he'd turn it off before leaving. The police asked why he did it. He said he was curious about how I lived. He said he found me interesting and wanted to know more about me. When they searched his apartment, they found dozens of photos he'd taken inside my place. Photos of my bedroom, my closet, my personal belongings. He'd even taken pictures of my mail, my bills, anything with personal information. He also had a journal where he'd written detailed notes about me, my schedule, my habits, what groceries I bought, what shows I watched on TV. He'd pieced together a disturbing amount of information about my life. The prosecutor said Craig would be charged with burglary, stalking, and invasion of privacy. With his confession and all the evidence, they expected a conviction. Craig Stevens pled guilty and was sentenced to 3 years in prison with 5 years probation after release. He was also banned from working in property maintenance ever again. But here's what really disturbs me. The detective said that based on Craig's journal, he'd been watching me long before he made the key copy. He'd been observing me in the building, learning my patterns, planning his intrusions for months, and I'd had no idea. I thought I was being careful with my security cameras. I thought I was safe in my own home, but the cameras didn't protect me. They gave me a false sense of security while someone was actively working to circumvent them. I moved out of that apartment immediately. I broke my lease, forfeited my deposit, and found a new place across town, a building with better security, no maintenance staff with easy access to tenant keys. I still have security cameras. In fact, I have more now. But I also have multiple hidden backup cameras that aren't connected to Wi-Fi, cameras that can't be jammed or disabled remotely. I also have a security system that alerts me if my door is opened when I'm not home, and I change my locks every 3 months just to be safe. But the damage is done. I'll never feel completely secure again, because I know how easy it was for Craig to invade my life, how simple it was for him to bypass my security measures and turn my safe space into his personal playground. Every time I come home, I check every room. I look for things that are out of place. I review my camera footage obsessively, looking for gaps or anomalies. I think about all those times he was in my apartment, touching my things, sitting on my couch, looking through my personal belongings. It makes my skin crawl. The worst part is knowing he was there when I couldn't see him. The cameras were supposed to show me everything, but he'd found a way to create blind spots, moments where I had no idea what was happening in my own home. That's the real horror of security cameras. They make us feel safe, make us feel like we're in control, but they can also be disabled, hacked, or circumvented by someone who knows what they're doing. And we rely on them so much that when they fail, we're left vulnerable without even knowing it. I trusted my Arlo cameras to protect me, but they couldn't protect me from someone who had physical access to my space and the knowledge to disable them. Technology is only as secure as the weakest point in the system, and in my case, the weakest point was the human element. The maintenance worker who was supposed to help keep the building safe, who instead used his access to violate residents' privacy. I check my cameras every day now, multiple times a day. I watch for gaps in recordings. I look for signs of tampering. I verify that all my backup systems are working. But in the back of my mind, I always wonder, what am I not seeing? What's happening in those few seconds between when one camera stops recording and another starts? What could someone do in the blind spots I don't even know exist? Those questions keep me up at night, because I learned the hard way that security cameras can't protect you from everything. Sometimes they just record your vulnerability, show you how easily your safety can be compromised, prove that the walls you thought were keeping danger out are actually paper thin. And that's a truth I wish I'd never learned, but now I know, and I'll never forget. Because Craig Stevens taught me that the scariest threats aren't the ones we can see coming. They're the ones that happen when we think we're being watched, when we think we're safe, when we think our cameras are showing us everything. But they're not. They never are. And that's the most disturbing truth of all.